Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 18 of Cool Story with David J. McNeil. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support. This episode features a chat with my good friend and television producer, Maureen Riley. Maureen and I met back in 1994 in Ottawa, Canada, while studying television broadcasting at Algonquin College. During a conversation with Maureen a few weeks back, we were remarking about how we had both recently celebrated a big anniversary, 25 years of working in the entertainment industry in Toronto. So, we decided to do an episode about that experience and all of the great things that have come along with the choice to embark on a career in the arts and how great it has been to work and live in the city of Toronto. Here's how that went. Hello, Maureen. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so nice to have you on the podcast. How are things in TO?
They are new and different, but relatively going well, I would say. Yeah.
We'd been talking about coming back to Toronto a while ago, and then we ended up staying here in Costa Rica because I kind of figured that, we were homesick and stuff, but the Toronto that is being offered to people right now is not the Toronto. I mean, it's that we know it.
Yeah, it's, and I live at Frenton Blue Jays Way, so I'm kind of in the middle of everything. Richard Garner, who is a mutual friend of ours, lives one building over from me. And we talk about getting out of this area as much as we can because it kind of feels apocalyptic in our neighborhood. It looks really different. Like I used to see 1 million people going to a baseball game. That just doesn't happen anymore. So, it's new and different times for sure.
Yeah, I was talking to Richard the other day, actually, and he described the neighborhood as being a lot like the film I Am Legend.
Yeah, we're seeing some... a lot of tents popping up.
Yeah.
I have a little park behind my house, and bless their souls, there's 7 tents out there. And we're lucky we're getting good weather now, but in a month or so, I can't even imagine what happens. It's crazy. It's crazy times for sure.
Yeah, well, and already for people who don't know Toronto, there'd been a concerted effort to do, I guess, what they figured they could do, and that was setting up respite centers where homeless people could go and live temporarily. And a bunch of those were built in the city. But obviously, when COVID hit, that's when you realize that there's just not enough services for all the people that need housing and stuff. So that's, one of the things I think that we're going to have to figure out. And it's one of the things that COVID has put in our face more so than I think we were used to seeing before.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, it's in our face. We see the tents. They're up university. They're in our neighborhoods. Like, time's up. Let's do something about it. Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today was that we had discussed last week that we had, over the past year, both celebrated a milestone, and that was on October the 29th. I was celebrating 25 years of having moved to Toronto to start a career. You had done so the year before because we were in the same television broadcasting program, but you graduated a year before I did. Yeah. That was a big deal for you. You wrote a letter called... Dear Toronto. Dear Toronto. So I came to Toronto August 28th, 1994. And it was a big, big deal. I'm an Army brat, so I had moved all over Canada, and to stay anywhere for any length of time is kind of a big deal for me. I was moving, I moved 7 times in 15 years, so it was a lot. And then I got to Ottawa, and I was born in Pembroke, so I knew the area and it felt homey, and I had good people there, and college was a great experience. And we met a lot of really great people there, and they became like family. And I had a job lined up after school, and I went in, and it was great. It was going to be entry level. It was a really cool company called ICE, which I think you're familiar with. Yep. So I went through 2 interviews, and then they called me and said, can you parlez-vous français? And I could not parlez-vous français. So I did not get that job. And then I felt at the time the opportunities in Ottawa were either, CPAC or get in with a government agency or something. And I grew up on
videos or
yeah. And I grew up on Much Music. I wanted to work for Much Music. So I packed up all my stuff. I left my boyfriend behind, came to Toronto with a group of people and went for it.
Yeah, because for people who don't, we have a lot of listeners who are Americans, people who don't really know the Canadian landscape or the entertainment business landscape. Toronto is pretty much the hub for most of what's produced in Canada. There's a lot of stuff that's produced there's stuff that's produced in Montreal as well, mostly French language stuff. They have their own microcosm there for entertainment and everything. They do a really good job of promoting and producing their own content for French language speakers. But then there's Vancouver also, but most of the work that's done in the country is done here in Toronto, whether it's series or feature films or broadcasting. All of the main centers for all of the broadcasters, all of the the Bells and the Rogers and all these companies are all in Toronto. So this is a place to be. If we had stuck around in Ottawa, like you said, we'd probably be doing government videos or working on Parliament Hill, that kind of thing, and that's limiting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you went to school with people. I certainly went to school with people who made very good careers in Ottawa. They loved it. They didn't leave. But I couldn't see it as my future for sure. So coming to Toronto was key. I had already volunteered and worked for YTV and CBC while I was in school. So I had made contacts. Yeah. So I had a job waiting for me when I got here. Mm-hmm. And then it was just, the hustle of the networking, et cetera, afterwards.
Yeah. Well, you and I both got our start the same way. And I think, more or less through the same person, a woman named Sue Edwards, who worked at the CBC. I don't know if she still works there. I haven't been in touch with her in a lot of years. But back in the day, there'd be specials that came to Ottawa. And so you and I both worked on YTV Achievement Awards. That was one of the things we did. There was also the Canada Day show, which was, Canada's birthday show, annual birthday show on July 1st. We both worked on that. And you might have worked on some others there in Ottawa, but those are the two that I did before I moved.
Yeah, the YTV Achievement Awards were the first show, and I had worked on it twice. So I probably worked on it with you the second time, maybe. So there was just, something up at school that they needed talent wranglers, sounded perfect. Yeah. Met Susan Edwards, as you said. We clicked. I adored her. And then I was talking to her about moving to Toronto, and she said, Maureen, if you move to Toronto, you'll work. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, she said the same thing to me.
Yeah, because it was just like, well, who do I know? So she gave me a few opportunities when I first got here. And I owe a lot to her because I don't know if I would have taken the jump if she hadn't been so positive and great about it.
Right. So, I think pretty early on in the game, it seemed like you were in a stream to become a producer, which you are now. But you seemed like you were pretty focused on that early on. Is that the case?
Yeah. So I went to the University of Manitoba for 2 years prior to going to Algonquin, and I was doing a combined arts education degree. And I've been writing since I was 7 years old, little stories, everything. So writing, I was really passionate about writing, and I was an English major at the University of Manitoba. I was excelling in that, but I was not excelling in the education courses that I was taking at the time.
Your heart wasn't really there for those ones?
Well, yeah, it was difficult. I was, I was in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I was student teaching in a school that was kind of economically a little lower. Mm-hmm. And I really just wanted to take all the kids home with me. They were showing up with no gloves and no lunch and so it was just really hard. So I did 2 years of University of Manitoba, and then I was like, oh my God, I'm wasting time and money here. So I just got to get it together. So I took a gap year in Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And I went to Algonquin. I picked up like 7 different pamphlets of anything that had writing in it. I applied to them all. I got into, I think, public relations, radio, and television. And to this day, I don't know why I picked television, but I did.
That's funny.
Yeah, I don't remember the process at all. But all I thought was, I can write. I'll be a writer. It'll be great. And then I don't know if you felt this way, but like day one of Algonquin College, it's a pretty technical school. Like, I didn't think that I would actually have to learn so much technical stuff.
Right.
So I was kind of scared. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? I am the least technical person. But then I kind of excelled. And, the projects at school where the teachers have to pick a producer, I was usually chosen as the producer. So it just seemed to go that way creatively for me. And then I just made really good friends with like the Ian Urbachs of the world who were so gifted technically. So I would pair up with him at school to get our projects done.
Yeah, I was talking to Johnny Hayes, who I'm pretty sure he was in my grade. I don't know if you knew him very well. Or Johnny was in the same class as me, and he's gone on to do big things. He now travels the world with Drake and Beyonce and Bieber, and he directs the video show that you see at the concert. And he was talking about going to Algonquin College, and he didn't even end up finishing because he ended up getting hired so much by the end of his second year that he just kind of walked away without graduating. And he was saying that he really appreciated how much hands-on it was at the college and stuff, because we'd do stuff like there'd be a news day where we'd put together almost like a full news day, as if we'd worked at CNN or whatever, right? And everybody would get various jobs. You'd be on camera, you'd be writing copy, whatever your skills were. You'd usually probably end up picking up something that was closest to your skill set, or various classes we had. We'd make documentaries or whatever. We did all kinds of stuff. I think we even did game shows and stuff like that. It was which came in handy for you, maybe foreshadow what you were going to do. Yeah, we can talk about that in a bit, but. So you got a chance to play around and see what you might be interested in doing. And I think a lot of people kind of stumbled on stuff that they didn't think would be interesting to them, but it did become, I think people who went in thinking they were going to be on camera or going to be copywriters or whatever found out that they were, going to be good floor directors or whatever. They'd pick up something that they were surprised that worked well with their personality. Yeah.
And aside from that too, it also helped me because I did a fair bit of directing in my career, and it helped me because I had just enough knowledge to know what I was talking about to get us in the right direction. Which helps. Sometimes it's not as bad as it was before, but sometimes as a woman, when you're coming in as a director and you're working with a group of people, it's best to know what you're talking about to get everyone going in the right direction.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the old B&C connector. Just throwing that out every now and again really saved a day for me.
Yeah, well, I think it works for everybody, for sure. The interesting thing, I was telling somebody this the other day, and that is that I guess basically because it's a communication industry and women are great communicators, almost all of my bosses have been women. The big bosses in the shops I've worked in have been women over the years.
Yeah.
And have you seen the same?
Oh yeah, I had some great, I think of that a lot. Like I had some really amazing mentors. I mean, I still have mentors. I have amazing, strong, smart, brilliant women who I grew up with in the industry that continue, like I'll ask them questions to this day. Yeah, for sure. And even I work for CBC a lot, and from Catherine Tate down, it's female led. So yeah, I 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah, because especially with everything that's going on these days, and people talking about equal pay and all that kind of stuff, I've always looked around and like I said, most of the time, the people I were working for were women, and I don't know whether or not they got paid as well as that's always hard to tell. That's always the thing, right? Whether or not they were getting paid the same as if a male had gotten that job or whatever. I don't know about that, but for sure, women have been more than well represented in broadcasting. I've always noticed over the years, which is pretty cool.
I think so. I think where you are too, like sometimes in comedy, I can be the only woman in the room for sure. But even then we had our Michelle Dailies and our Sarah Fowleys, and yeah. Lots of really great, strong women for sure.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of the work that you've done over the years, especially with the comedy stuff. It's who's who, and a lot of these shows are big Canadian shows, big American shows that are purposed for Canadian audiences, because a lot of the shows are franchises now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've worked on stuff from everything from Battle of the Blades, which was very popular in Canada, Canada's Next Top Model, the Gemini Awards, which is one of the big award shows that's happened over the years here in Canada, MTV Live for MTV Canada, the Canadian Comedy Awards. You've worked on Divine Design with Candace Olson, the Juno Awards, which is like our Grammy Awards, Open Mic with Mike Bullard, and on and on and on. And then you did Still Standing, the CBC, which that was a big hit. You guys did really well with that. Just a lot of big shows you've worked on. All kinds of specials with famous people and athletes, Brian Orser, Blame It on the Blues, and so on and so forth. You've done a lot of cool stuff.
I have. I just finished Family Feud with Jerry D, and there was about 3 of us backstage in our pod.
Yes.
And we were just talking about how much cool stuff and cool people we have met because of our choice of career. Like it really is incredible, the things and places that like we found ourselves in because we work in this industry. It's mind-blowing sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you got to pinch yourself. Am I really here? I worked on the SCTV special.
Right. Yeah. I remember
the Netflix, and like Martin Scorsese was directing it and Jimmy Kimmel was there. And then I found myself backstage with like the entire SCTV cast just before they went on. And we were all scrunched into this place. And I looked around and I was like, look where I am. This is so crazy. And I turned to Catherine O'Hara and I was almost crying. And I just went, this is so special. Just probably like, why is this woman crying? Who is she? But it's just things like that you're like, what? Like, how did I get dropped into this beautiful little place with all of these talented people? So there's been some really, really cool things.
I had a similar moment to that it was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I was lucky enough to get cast in an episode of Schitt's Creek, and I was on set and I was doing a scene with Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, and already I'm just like, wow, this is like Canadian comedy royalty right here. And then I turn around, I had no idea, I hadn't checked the call sheet. I turn around and who's standing in front of me wants to chat about the scene is Bruce McCullough of Kids in the Hall. He's directing the scene, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Bruce McCullough, the guy who sang "These Are the Daves I Know" that everybody sang back to me every time I went to a party in the 90s.
Right? Yes.
I'm like, how did I end up here?
Yeah, it's so crazy, right? Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's fun. And then you also worked on another huge show that you worked on was Big Brother Canada. What was that like? That's a whole beast of its own, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. And I'll tell you, it's probably one of the most creatively fulfilling jobs I've ever had. I was a challenge producer with Trevor Boris. And Trevor was like die hard, loved the show, watched every American and UK episode, like just loved
Trevor.
it.
He used to be on that. What was that? What was the Much Music show? He used to be on. It was the one basically where they used to take the piss out of music videos.
Yeah.
They used to mock everybody.
I wish I could remember what it was called, because Deb DiGiovanni was on it. Like there was a bunch of really cool people on it.
Yeah, there was a lot of great young comics who were on that show.
Video on Trial. That's what it was called.
Yeah. Trevor Boris is brilliant. I adore him. We had so much fun working together. So I never watched Big Brother. I wasn't a fan of it really, but I had worked for Insight Productions a whole bunch. Erin Brock is the producer to this day, and she just called me and she's like, we think you would be a really good challenge producer, your comedy background, your creativity. We just think it's a good fit. And I was like, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. That sounds super fun. Pete Farragher was the art director on it. I don't know if you know Pete.
No, I don't know Pete.
And sorry, Pete, that might not be the right title, but he's this like brilliant, creative man who just will never say no to anything. And it was just the best experience. So I did that for 2 years. And what was cool is I was working on the first season where Endemol came over and taught us how to do it for a few days. And it was just a weird experience too, because you're not in a studio. You're behind two-way glass the entire time with RoboCams and stuff. So it was a really cool experience, and a really cool experience to watch these people live like that. Like, it really is a cool social experiment as well. And so working with Pete and Trevor and an amazing team and a special effects person. And so I would say, like, hey, Pete, I think I want giant cupcakes in the backyard. And you go, okay, how do we do that? And so we would plan it, build it, put it in the backyard, have it played. And it was so much fun. So much fun. And that you can really let your creativity go wild doing those challenges, right? It's kind of similar to what they do on Survivor with the challenges or whatever they're called there. It's you put together a giant kind of board game almost scenario that the players have to take part in. And where did you get your ideas from? Was it just random stuff, or you pick up things from all over the place? Or? Yeah. Well, the first season, I would say the ideas just came from random. I'm a super visual person. Mm-hmm. So if I would like see something in a magazine or see something on television or walking down the street, see something, I'll give you an example. I don't even know why. I just thought it would be so funny if all the house guests were dressed as giant bumblebees. Yeah. And they would have to do an entire challenge dressed as bumblebees. Right. So we also had to pitch all of our ideas to the network. So we would have a full day of pitching to the network, and they would say yay or nay. And our deck was just like, I just threw pictures at them so that they could really see what I meant. And for this particular bumblebee challenge, I said bumblebees and they said yes. They didn't need anything else, the network. Right. It was just like, bumblebees, yes, we love it. So we dressed them up in these big furry costumes with giant wings and like really kind of weirdo giant flowers in the backyard, and they would have to like collect the pollen from the flowers and get it back to their whatever, and whoever got the most pollen in an amount of time was the winner. So it's just like, and these are like adults dressed as bumblebees. Sure. It was just fun. Isn't that one of the most fun things about being a producer is you come up with an idea and then you sit down and you tell people in the wardrobe department, the props department, and then they go do their thing and then they come back with these amazing costumes and props and all that kind of stuff. And you're just like, oh my God, look at how brilliantly they interpreted my idea. It's so fun. Yeah, it's probably one of the most satisfying things to like those words that you wrote down on a piece of paper to see them come to life. Yeah. That's really cool. And I have to say, I don't know if you know Lisa Williams, but she is like one of the best wardrobe people in the city, and her team would just knock it out of the park as well. It was so cool what they would do. Yeah. So you've worked on a few shows like that. You just finished up Family Feud Canada season 2. Yep. And then you worked on Big Brother Canada and other shows like that are kind of, they're franchises, right? Yeah. It's you get the rights to do that, and they do it all over the world. And when you're like pitching ideas and stuff, you said you had to talk to the network. Do you also have to talk to CBS about that kind of stuff to find out whether or not they figure whether or not it still fits with their brand? Or once you've taken it over, you've already agreed to kind of do it the way how does that work? So I think, so for Big Brother, Endemol owns the rights to the show. So Bell would have bought the rights to the show and then asked Insight to produce it. Mm-hmm. So I think once that exchange of money and choosing the person and making sure they're the right people to do the job, I think for approving challenges and stuff, they're hands off on that. I would say that if they saw something that they didn't necessarily like or was against brand, they would shut it down. But no, they came over and trained us, and then they went back home to Holland or wherever they're from, and we went for it. And it was the producers at Insight, the network people, and then we collectively decided what should be on the show. Yeah. And I imagine they when you decide you're going to get into that partnership, they probably hand you a pretty thick Bible, what they call in the business, that's got sort of the gist of how everything's supposed to work, so that it's like, so it looks
when you're watching it, no matter where you are, there's continuity to it.
Yeah, for sure. Like the graphics and the music and all of the branding. But it's funny because in Canada, format shows sometimes get not the best treatment because everyone just thinks like, why is Amazing Race Canada winning 1 million awards when they just get the Bible, then they do it? Like a lot of people don't think there's a lot of creativity in that. But when we take a format show and Canadians are playing the game and we're putting our Canadian flavor and we want to add things or subtract things or make it for a Canadian audience, it sometimes gets tricky. And also, I've had a Bible handed to me for a show, and it was literally 5 very absurd pages. Like, I didn't know what they were talking about. Or
Right.
It wasn't the entire show, that's for sure. So then you have to like backtrack, start watching other their episodes and kind of figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just for Big Brother too, the coolest thing that Endemol did was once a year, they would have all the countries come together for a big summit. Mm-hmm. And so Aaron would come home with a DVD of all the coolest challenges that the other countries did. So we got to look at that and borrow a little bit and make them Canadian and do them ourselves.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's funny. I worked on a show a bunch of years ago that was similar to Big Brother and might have set a precedence for some of those shows. It was called The Lofters, U8 TV.
Oh, yeah. Were you a lofter?
I was not a lofter, no, but
you worked on it.
I worked on it, and they had a second component to it. That show was a bit of a sweatshop. I mean, it was cool. Like what they did was they set up all the people like in Big Brother to live in this loft, and it was very similar, and the cameras were on all the time, and they did that kind of thing. But then the other thing they did was they used it as a sweatshop to produce other TV shows for the network. Alliance Atlantis at the time that produced it. So all these people, while they were living there, they worked on shows that got produced for the web, and then some of the shows got repackaged and then broadcast as their own shows. And so, it was a bit of a party atmosphere. Some of the people that got onto the show partied their asses off and had fun, and invited people back to the loft and got laid and did all that kind of stuff that you could do on a show like that, and within reason. And then some of the people really took advantage of the situation. One of them is the young woman who ended up hosting Big Brother Canada. Arissa Cox.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. She was one of the people that really embraced that opportunity and ran with it. Another one of the people who was one of the lofters in season 1 was Jennifer Hedger. And she was one of the people that really took it seriously. And she turned it into a career at TSN. She was one of the first women I remember being a sports, quote unquote, sort of a sports anchor, doing the sports desk stuff back in the early 2000s. And if you're a Canadian sports fan, you know who she is.
Yeah, for sure.
But that was kind of what they had going on there. But it was an interesting social experiment at the time too, because I remember one of the things that they did was it was sponsored by Budweiser, and they had a huge Budweiser fridge there full of booze and Bud and other products and stuff like that, and ended up taking it away because it became a problem, because they were actually a little bit worried that some of the people who were living in the loft were starting to have drinking problems.
Right.
So I don't know if they do that much anymore, but that was something that they did back in the day, which got nixed.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting social experiment. And
for sure. I think it was a little bit ahead of its time. It was also around the time like Real World was already on television, right? So I think, and I do remember all the little video shows that they were doing it was digital at the time, right? So yeah, it was a little bit ahead of its time. It was really interesting.
Yeah, it was a fun show to work on. What was your sense of what it was like to work on a show like Big Brother Canada, where I think that's got to be a stressful environment to be on if you really throw yourself into it, the mind games and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, to be a player?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it's interesting. It really evolved over the years. So for the first season, in my opinion, only a couple of people knew how to play the game. And when I say play the game, play like the chess game that it is. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a whole bunch of other people just wanted to be on TV. They thought they were on The Real World or something. Like it was just a cool, and then it really evolved. And to watch somebody who can really play 4 moves ahead, it really is cool. Like it is really, really cool to see people do that. So also back to the challenges, like we would test these challenges to see if they worked, if people could cheat, stuff like that. And I remember one time they were playing and it wasn't working. And I was like, oh my God, like, have we made this too hard? And then, that's television content. It's got to work. And then one of the guys ran to the kitchen in the middle of it and said to the camera, I'm throwing this challenge, which is something that they can do so that they don't get an X on their back for being a strong player.
Right.
And so it's just like, oh my God, all that stress of does this work? And they're actually throwing the challenge, which I would have never known. So stuff like that is interesting as well.
One of the shows that garnered itself some awards, and I remember chatting with you about that. I remember mentioning to you it was a show I'd watched that had a lot of heart. Was Still Standing. What was that like working on that show?
It was the absolute best. I saw a lot of, I call the nooks and crannies of Canada. Like I thought I had been coast to coast, and I'd been coast to coast. I had not been coast to coast to coast. It was amazing. We met amazing people. We got to tell really cool stories. We were places I never thought I would be, like Haida Gwaii on the west coast, of BC. Yeah. It was the best, and it was also working in stand-up in a way that we were creating a space for stand-up in small towns.
Right.
So,
do me a favor. Explain what the concept is to the show, just so people understand what the show was about and how it worked.
Yeah. So Johnny Harris, who's a stand-up comedian, we would go to small towns on the ropes. So they were struggling. And we would just find the heart and soul of the town. So these were places, one time the population was like 375. Usually the population would be around 1,500 maybe. So not big places. Like Main Street was the big hub. Everybody knew everybody. And I always described it like we would show up and go, oh my God, why would anybody live here? And then by the end, you're like, I think I want a vacation here. Do I want to buy a house here? I think I'm going to open a coffee shop. So it was just really finding really cool stories in the nooks and crannies of Canada. And, we live in a really, really big country, and there are a lot of different people with different stories in different areas. So it was just really cool. And working in comedy, which is, one of my biggest passions, to be able to work in a writer's room and then bring writers on the road and have it all happening all at the same time. Like they would write a 45-minute set in 5 days, which, is really, really incredible. And then Johnny would cram it into his head overnight and perform it for the town. So the other part of the show is that during the week, we're meeting like 5 or 6 people in the town. We spend some time with them. And then the whole show is based on Johnny's stand-up, and the stand-up is about these 5 people. So they're in the front row listening to stories about themselves, and their faces are lighting up, and everyone gets it, and there's good laughs. And it's really the perfect show for CBC. It ticks a lot of boxes. We met a lot of different people. It showed a lot of different Canadians. So it was really amazing. The hard part was it wasn't just getting on a plane and going to Edgerton, Alberta. It was getting on a plane, then a 5-hour car ride, then getting there, then setting up. And I didn't have any story editors. I was doing all the back end editing as well. So after 2 years, I got a little tired and a little burnt out. So I had to give it up, but it's really such a near and dear project for sure. It was pure joy working. The team was amazing. The people were amazing. It was really cool.
Yeah, because I think what was interesting about it is watching the show and those moments where Johnny had really, well, I'm sure it's the whole team, where the issue at the heart of what was ailing the town was really, really fleshed out and understood and Johnny would come out and make jokes about it and stuff. And you could see the way they landed, like you said, on the faces of the people who were in the audience. For other people to be able to see that, see what they were going through and be empathetic and whatever, and they could share that moment with other people who weren't from their hometown or whatever, or have somebody put it back to you to say, man, that's hard. This is hard what you're going through, whatever the big plant in town closed down or whatever. I guess that's probably often what it was. It was one industry towns where that one industry was dealing oftentimes.
Yep.
And then, but for people to get that sort of recognition that what you're going through is really hard, that's a huge thing.
Yeah. And there was a journey throughout. I wanted it to be a journey throughout the episode so that you do see the hardness, but at some point in the, second act or whatever, okay, we're done with the hardness.
Yeah.
Look how beautiful. Like, they're surrounded by these gorgeous mountains and trees, and they have their community outings, and everybody knows everybody, and the kids are all playing together. And it's by the end, you forget that they're on the ropes and that they're, just Canadians living their best lives at the end.
Yeah, and that everybody and the sense of community that's been bolstered by doing this thing together too.
Absolutely.
Right, pulling everybody together on this new project that's got nothing to do with their everyday lives, but just that's pretty exciting. I mean, it's like the circus coming to town.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's funny because we'd be in the town hall that holds 200 people. And my biggest fear was always that all the people wouldn't get into the building. Mm-hmm. And a couple of times, like, people would come from other towns. So, like, one time we had 600 people waiting to get into a 300-person venue.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff was crazy. But great. And then we would figure it out. It was like monitors and the bar across the street and just figuring all that out. So
being a producer.
Yes. But I will say, at the risk of, not making this all bubblegum and rainbows, we would also find out the small town stuff that, don't sit so-and-so next to so-and-so.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Each other. We would just be like, okay, that's too much information, but it kind of funny at the same time. Yeah.
You know who's been messing around with who, and who cheated who in a business deal, and exactly, all that.
There are no secrets. Secrets. Yeah.
Well, that's a funny thing. When Belinda and I moved down to Costa Rica, we're living in a town that fluctuates between 4,000 to 5,000 people, depending on what time of the year it is and whether it's tourist season or not. And we got here and we started meeting people. I said to Belinda at one point, I said, for the first time ever, we have to, and she was in the same boat. We have to start thinking about, how careful we are dealing with everybody, because we're used to living in big cities. We had lived in Toronto before, where you often don't even know who lives next door to you. And Ottawa is even a pretty big city. Belinda had grown up in Johannesburg, which is a massive city. And it was not something we ever really thought about when we were growing up. And now that we're in a small town, you're like, you got to be careful what you really do,
who you're telling what.
Invite to things and all that kind of stuff, because it gets around quick.
Sure does. The politics, for sure. Yeah.
So what are some of the other... what are some of the other big shows that you kind of worked on that stand out in your career? You've done a lot of comedy. Maybe we could talk about that a bit. I mean, how did you end up in comedy? Was that through Mike Bullard?
Even earlier. So my fourth job in Toronto when I got here was working on the Gemini Awards, which is now the Canadian Screen Awards, which is equal to the Emmys.
Yeah. They kind of amalgamated a couple different awards.
Yeah. So I was assistant to the producers on that. So I was working with Joe Bodolai and David Rosen on that. Joe Bodolai was an American living in Canada. He had worked on Saturday Night Live. He was wildly creative, was so fun to work with. And so being the assistant to the producers, I would be dealing with the writers a lot in the writers' room, just like organizing and stuff. And they were always comedians. So I was making friends with like some of the biggest comedians in the country. And then that led to going to the Rivoli to watch them, meeting more people. And then working on open mic with Mike Bullard, he was a comedian, and the comedians working on that. Just met some of the funniest and coolest people that became my friends, but also people that, you know, I ended up producing shows for them or working on shows that they were doing. I mean, comedy is just the coolest thing. It's so technical. It can go a million different ways, depending on the room, depending on, you know, it just fascinates me how someone can get up on stage and change the energy in the room, or what works and what doesn't. And it's not the same every single time. So all of that is just really fascinating to me. And I love people's rhythms. I love seeing what they're going to do to change things up. Like, it's just really cool. I've really fallen in love with it, and I'm too chicken to do it. So this is the next best thing for me, to watch and help people do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember years ago you had called me up and you said, "Oh, I need some help." You were working on a special. It was for the, you'll tell me what the exact name was, but it was the Nubian Night at Yuck Yuck.
Oh, yes. So
it was basically, it was a big comedy night for people of color, right? It wasn't just black comics. It was Indian comics and different people from people of color who had done this special night that was going on at Yuck Yucks. It happened for years. And I remember you asked me, you sent me a whole bunch of tape. You said, "Can you go through and kind of got stuff you like?" And I got, one of the cool things about that was I got to watch lots of Russell Peters, who I was not that familiar with, but who is just incredible. You know, and there were so many other great comics on that that show.
Well, it's funny because Jean-Paul, I don't know if you know Jean-Paul, but he was one of the comedians that was like part of the roundtable. So Comedy Network asked this little white girl to do a 1-hour documentary on the Nubian disciples of Prior, which was Kenny Robinson had put together a night at Yuck Yucks, and it was all comics of color. And they allowed a few of the white boys, they called them, to come in. So it was a 1-hour documentary that I did, and I'm so proud of it. They've just had their 25th anniversary, and I did the 10-year anniversary. And I just watched the documentary again, and it kind of stands up. Like, I'm still pretty proud of it. But so we shot a couple of nights at Yuck Yucks with all of these comedians, and then it was basically a clip show too, because Dave Chappelle had come through that room. I think Will Smith was in the audience. Like, they had a lot of really cool people associated with that room. And it still goes. So it's, I think it's like the last Sunday of the month. And Kenny does the room. And that's actually where I met Jerry D, because Jerry would go do the Nubian room. Yeah, so, he was
on the special. I remember watching his tape as well.
Yeah, and that was the very first time that I met him. And then after that, Jerry asked me to do, so I've done 2 DVDs for Jerry. I've done No Reading Ahead.
New Year's Eve special for him, I saw in here.
Yeah. No Reading Ahead was his first DVD that I produced and directed. And then he did a CBC special, New Year's Eve special, that he's also turned into a DVD. And I produced and directed that as well. And so Jerry has given me such good opportunities. It's pretty amazing. And because the CBC special, I was actually in like a giant truck, multicam directing.
Right.
And I giggled all the way through it because I was just like, what am I doing? But it was all ISO'd and, edited later, but still at the same time, he let me direct it. So that was pretty cool.
One of those moments where you're like, how did I get here?
How did I get here?
How did Jerry D get here? How did anybody get here?
Yeah.
Hard work and paying your dues and
absolutely. Yeah. So the Nubian special I'm quite proud of. I would love it if I could produce it again, but I'm not the person to produce it again. That's for sure. It's funny when you look back on things and you're like, why the hell would I, anyways. But it turned out good. And it was Russell Peters and it was Kenny Robinson and JP. And we did this round table that connected all of the clips. So it was interesting because there was also a section of the documentary of all the people that bombed. So that was kind of a fun little section as well to see people just wipe out.
Yeah, I remember that was one of the things that you had asked me was look for some real, car accidents, train derailments. Let me know if you see any real train derailments.
And that room was crazy because the audience were not shy in telling the people if they were doing a good job or not.
Right.
Like they were very vocal, they were booing, they were like everything. So it was a really difficult room. And that's why people wanted to do it, because they thought if I can do that room, I can do anywhere, really.
Well, that's similar to what playing the Apollo was like, right? The Apollo in New York.
It was amazing.
The Nubian Night, where did it first start? What that wasn't in the entertainment district. That wasn't when they had that's not the big yucks there, right? Or did it start there?
I think it did. I think that Yuck Yucks has been there for a while.
Yeah, I forget now because I'm 50, and that to me is still the new club. But I don't know; it's probably been around for over 20 years.
Oh wait, you know what? I'm lying. There was a Yucks club at Yonge and Eglinton, remember? And then that moved.
Yeah, no, I remember going up there because one of the last time shows I saw there was Mitch Hedberg before he passed away, and then shortly after that they closed that store and opened up the one right down in the entertainment district, which is a perfect spot for tourists. And
it is.
Right. It's like having a club at Times Square or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good place. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, and we were at Mitch Hedberg together separately because I saw him at that Yucks club too.
Yeah, he was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I was actually lucky enough to get to know him a bit because I was shopping around a show at the time, and I got him interested enough that he wanted to hear more. So we chatted on and off for a good portion of about a year. And then I saw him when he came to Toronto, and then kind of lost track of him. And then he passed away. But what a phenomenal talent that guy was. So
incredible. So I discovered him because I was working on open mic. And so he did a short set on open mic, and I was just like, oh my God, who is this guy? He's brilliant. Like the amount of writing that he has to do that rapid fire comedy is incredible. And I remember he had a little Mickey of Jack Daniels in his pocket, and he asked me if I could get him some Coke. So Coca-Cola.
Yes.
Just again, right place, right time, meeting the coolest people ever.
Yeah, it's interesting meeting comics and, just being able to kick back and pick their brains and chat, the place where they're where they are seated and how they see the world. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just brilliant minded. I mean, the good ones, the real comedians, just brilliantly minded people that just have another take on the world. And it's so cool. And I'm so lucky that some of my best friends are comics. Like the conversation is always good. Like it's always in a different place, like having fun, having a laugh, chipping away at something or, and even just celebrating some of the most morbid stuff you could want to discuss. Yeah. That stuff is just celebrated all the more. I love that there are no rules. You can say anything you want. No one's holding you to anything, let's discuss it all. Everything's on the table. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, let's go back to being a producer. What makes a good producer? Oof, that is a really solid question. What's so funny in my later years of my career, I realized that we went to Algonquin College. We learned a lot of really great things. We learned a technical aspect. We learned creativity. We learned writing. We learned color temperature. But nobody really talks about being a manager and what makes a good manager. Mm-hmm. And it's only until I became a showrunner that my management skills, I was really starting to take a look at them and think like, how do I motivate these people and how do I get the best out of them? And I think for comedy too, it's like you can't have a tense working space for comedy. No. Like it's got to be light. You got to be able to drift around and find things. So I think a good producer is a good multitasker and a good listener and a good manager and a good people person. Like you can see where people excel and you encourage them in that area. And where they don't excel, you just adjust and figure it out in another way. So I think that's what makes a good producer. Having a cool head when everybody else is losing their mind.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think if you can keep it together under pressure, if you understand budgets, if you can move money around in a creative way, if you make sure that the money gets on the screen and is not wasted in other places. I've been really lucky that I got to work with a lot of really good producers and saw what worked for them. Lynn Harvey being one of them.
Sure. Yeah.
Really early in my career, I got to work with Lynn Harvey, and man, she is a brilliant woman, and she says what she means. And if she doesn't like it, she'll tell you. And I really respect that, because it's better than running around trying to figure out what people want. So yeah, all of that stuff. I think it grows and changes every day. And also I've worked with some really bad leaders. And I was like, okay, that's what I will not do when I finally get there.
Yeah, you learn from that as well too, right?
Yeah,
you learn
for
from
sure.
The failures, or the projects that could have gone better, or failed leaders, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And there's been a lot of stuff that, barely made it to air, and maybe wasn't the best, but yeah, like you say, you learn from that stuff too. And I just love it. Like, can you imagine we get paid to hang around with our friends and make stuff and laugh all day? Like, we are the luckiest people in the whole wide world.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because they used to, when we were going to school, people used to say, the average person these days is probably not going to have one career. They're going to have 5 careers or 6 careers or whatever. And it's like, well, I haven't had 6 careers, but, oftentimes when, you talk to people and they've had 5 jobs in their life, I've had hundreds of jobs in my life. Like, if you count commercials and appearances on TV shows or little one-off projects you work on, and then just the sheer amount of people you work and who become a part of your life. And if you're somebody who's good at keeping up with people, you end up having a pretty big circle of friends and acquaintances.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen if you work at a bank for 20 years or you work for the federal government and, only work in a couple different departments. It's amazing, the network that you can create working in this industry, because you're always jumping from project to project. And the other thing too about this industry, which is really good to learn, is you have to become a hustler.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because while you're working on this gig, you're always trying to figure out what the next one's going to be at the same time often.
Yeah, the hustle is real. And when people ask me, what do I do? That's a really hard question because I do a lot of different things. And then depending on the group of people I'm working with, those things change. So if I'm working with writers, I'm less of a writer and more of a producer. Do you know what I mean? And I think that all of those years of being an Army brat kind of set me up to get parachuted into a situation that sometimes it's a short job. Like, we can work on something for 3 weeks or 3 months, and you get parachuted in with a group of people, and you have to really quickly figure out who's doing what, how, and when, and how can I augment it? How can I make it better? How can I help it? Mm-hmm. It's a really quick assessment period where people who are at the bank for 25 years, they know how Joe works. Yeah. And they know how to work with Joe, where we have to figure it out all the time, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting though. You draw the comparison to work, to living on a base and dropping in and have to figure out the landscape quickly. Yeah, I can imagine how that would be very helpful for you.
Yeah. And I think, all of us freelancers, we've chosen this job for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. Like we like that it switches up. We like that it's different people. We would have got that bank job for all of that security that our parents really wanted us to get. Yeah. Yes. That was a fun conversation with our parents at the time, I'm sure. I think you mentioned in your little bit about moving to Toronto, about how your parents had supported you and everything. But I was going from dropping out of school to be a teacher, which is probably one of the most solid things. And I had to go tell my dad, no, I'm dropping out and I'm going to go into television. And he was like, what is that? I don't understand.
You might as well have just told your dad you wanted to be a carny.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, I think my parents realized that, when I was pretty young, that I was going to be following a different path than they had followed. So I don't think they were terribly surprised. I mean, from the get-go, when I was a little kid, we were already doing shows around our neighborhood and entertaining, and you could see that I was probably going to go in that direction. But, to watch your kid jump in it or whatever, I'm sure they must have been just like, oh God, what is he getting himself into? And is he ever, and I always used to come back to Ottawa, and people in Ottawa didn't see a lot of successful people working in entertainment because it's just not a thing there. So I, used to come back for Christmas holidays and stuff, and people would talk to me like kind of in a way like, how do you pay your rent and all that kind of stuff? It's like, well, some of these gigs can, if you can keep employed, some of these things pay pretty well. Some of them are union gigs and all that kind of stuff, and benefits, and sometimes you get a car and, all that kind of stuff. But when I'd go back home, there definitely was a sense that he must be, and sometimes he must be close to starving.
Right. Yeah. In the early days. Yeah.
It was that way in the early days for sure.
Oh, so I was waitressing in Ottawa while I was going to school. I think I was waitressing like 4 nights a week or something like that. So I had, in my pocket, all that cash from tips plus the paycheck. And when I moved to Toronto, I was doing craft services. I was making $100 a day. I was working from 7 in the morning till sometimes like 2 in the morning, and I was just like, oh my God, like, how am I going to pay my rent and everything on just this PA rate?
Yep.
I figured, I loved it so much, it didn't matter, but I figured it out and it got better. But yeah, it was crazy.
I had the exact same situation. One of my first gigs, like working, I was going to say 9 to 5. It is not 9 to 5, but working every day on a show. Was working as a PA, an office PA on the series Wind at My Back that was produced by Sullivan Entertainment for the CBC. They'd done a lot of really big things, right? They did Anne of Green Gables, they did Road to Avonlea, all those Lucy Maud Montgomery books that were converted into series, and so they were a big deal. But I got hired as a PA, and I was making $100 a day, and before taxes. And then, you'd start at 7 in the morning. Like you said, you'd put in 16-hour day. And I remember one of the other PAs saying, whatever you do, don't try to figure out what you make per hour. It's just going to make you cry.
Too depressing.
Don't even try. Don't even try to do the math. I did that for a season and a half. I learned more on that about even for acting, like working as an actor, how to be, watching other established actors, like going on down to the set and seeing Gordon Pinsent.
Oh, man.
Guys like that, and some of the amazing actors, Shirley Douglas, who recently passed away, but she's Kiefer Sutherland's mom. She was one of the stars of that show. A lot of big comedy actors who worked on that show, and you got to see how they behaved on set. That's half of the battle, being an actor, right? Figuring out how to do the behind the scenes stuff and how to treat it like a business.
Yeah.
And then dealing with executives in charge of production and. It was just, I learned so much in that 1 year, and I never gotten paid so little, but learned so much, so it was an amazing opportunity.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder if I had to tell 22-year-old Maureen again, whether to go to Algonquin or just go to Toronto and start PAing.
Yeah.
I wonder what I would tell her to do, because you're right. It's a really good education. I was doing craft services with Charlotte Bonville on our first shows. Yeah. So we were meeting everybody at the craft service table, executives, actors, like everybody. And you're right. Like everything we were learning, there was a lot to learn for sure.
Well, I often think about that too. I mean, there's a lot that I learned and then showed up on sets and I knew about, having gone to a production school. But then also there's a human aspect, and it's all the relationships that we had. If we hadn't gone to Algonquin College to study there, just think about all the people that we might not have known who have become huge staples in our little community and in our lives.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's not a lot I look back on, and I think I wish I had done that different, because everybody, you know how it is. Everything that you did led you to where you are today. And if you're happy with that, then.
Yeah, absolutely. No. Like, I I do like, and we were talking about this earlier, like I do like thinking about when we all first came to Toronto and just, shit scared. The city was so fast. Everything was moving so fast and we were so anonymous. And I came here with, I would say there were like 3 of us first came here, and then more came down like a few months later. And then I think Richard came like a year later, and we clung to each other. That's why we're such good friends, because we clung to each other. We had such good times. I mean, we were running around Toronto in the 90s, which was like the best time ever. Having parties, going to the coolest bars that don't exist anymore. But I'm Algonquin was like a pretty important thing in my life, for sure, for all of the people that are my family right now, for sure.
Yeah, agreed. I say it all the time. That's one of the things that I was talking about last week when I put together a little video thanking all the people that have been part of my 25-year journey. That a lot of the friends that came down here with us at the same time were a huge part of that ecosystem that helped us all achieve what we've achieved in our own lives.
Who came with you, Dave? Like who moved at the same time as you?
Well, there was 2 people in my class, 2 of my friends, Todd Voot and Patricia Cannell. They were the first 2 that came down. They since married and have children together and left Toronto and lived in Halifax, and they work in production there and Montreal now. But they moved to Toronto about half a year before I did. And so I showed up and stayed at their place for the first few months before I found my own place. Sean Cookson was another guy who was in my class who came down kind of around the same time. There was a bunch of people from your grade because we all knew each other because we were all in the school at the same time.
Yeah.
And then a few more people that I'd gone to school with showed up later. Some people just stayed for a while and worked in Toronto and then moved to other cities or moved back to their hometowns and worked there.
Yeah.
I was surprised, though, that the number of people that I went to school with, I feel like maybe more than half of them ended up working in broadcast in some way, where a lot of people go to school and study something and never work in it at all. Or because a lot of people will think, oh, that's a pretty exciting, glamorous world to work in. You go to school and figure out, well, less so, that it's not very as glamorous. It's a blue collar, hardworking job. In a lot of ways. And then if you move to a city and then try to get a job and you're young and nobody knows you or whatever, it can be pretty brutal getting your foot in the door. You have to be pig-headed to really stick with it to make it in this business. And a lot of people they don't have that in them. So, some people decided pretty early on that they didn't want to fight that fight. That there could be an easier way to make money. And for those people who did that, good for them too, because there are a lot of easier ways to make money. I always tell people, I get calls once in a while from somebody saying, it's often more on the acting side. My kid wants to be in the business. Can you talk to him or her about it? And I say, sure, I'll give them the real deal, like the glitz and the glam side, and then sort of the trudging through the, the crap side of what it's like to try to make it in this business. And, and then I talk to some people and give them some advice. And then one young guy from Ottawa, I know his dad, he grew up in my neighborhood. He got in touch with me and he said, my son wants to be an actor. He's already gone to school and he's studied and stuff and he's getting out of the business and stuff. I was like, well, great. He's already off to a really good start. Can you chat with him? So I talked to him a bit about it and I said, you got to hustle and you got to pour it on while you're in your 20s, because later on you're going to have a girlfriend or wife or boyfriend or husband or whatever, and kid or whatever, and you're not going to be able to invest as much time as you can when you're in your 20s. You really just got to pour it on and just kill it, right? If you want to make it. And then so one thing I suggested to him was that I'd studied at Second City, and I suggested he do the same. And then just last week he posted, this friend of mine posted that he was so proud of his son, Will Jenkins, that he just got accepted to the Second City Conservatory.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so his family was so proud, and he listed off all the amazing people that had studied there, the Belushis and the Aykroyds and the O'Haras and the
Myers
and all these people, Mike Myers, everybody and stuff. And he was just really thrilled. So I was happy to see that happening. But for every one of the calls I've gotten that were like that, where a person was going to take it seriously, I've also talked to somebody who calls me up and says, well, what's the first step? And I say, well, have you looked into going to school? And there's a long pause that kind of says, well, that sounds like work.
Right.
I want to work in show business.
Like school was school was a good representation of what the job was going to be like. Like, we spent so many hours at school because we were in our classes, but we were also there creating
till
our
3
projects.
in the morning sometimes.
Oh my God. Yeah. And another thing just about like how you have to love it and you have to be all in or it doesn't really work out. Like for Big Brother, for example, that was a 3-month contract. And I would know, like, I would tell my friends, I will see you in April, because I'm working basically 7 days a week till sometimes, you know, the wee hours of the morning. And so you just have to be able to be okay to give up some stuff. But it wasn't giving up for me because I just love it so much.
Yeah.
But sometimes you are sucked off the face of the planet to go work on something that takes so much time. But then in the end, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and there's a certain amount of burnout too after the fact if you work that intensely on a show. It's kind of, I see all these people who are working day and night on political campaigns. And it reminds me of a similar sort of a job, right? You come in, you build an army that only is set to exist for a couple months or whatever. Obviously, U.S. elections take a lot longer than our elections here, but that's kind of what you do. You like I mentioned the circus earlier. You come in, you create this thing that's only going to exist for a few months, and you got to get it done. And the thing about working in production is it's all about time, how quickly you can do it, right?
Yeah.
Which leads me to my next question, actually, and that is, you've been working. I haven't been back in Toronto since production started working under COVID standards or whatever you want to call it, directives, or what is that like? Because like I said, the big thing about producing a television show is making it move quickly so you don't waste money. Now, how do you get all that done when people have to be spread out and compartmentalized and do all that? It must slow things down and must drive up the cost of a production. Or no, I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, it definitely drives up the cost just because of all the COVID protocols that had to be put in place, like the plexiglass alone in between people, the masks, the sanitizer. A producer told me, a couple of producers have told me that creating a show during COVID times tax on another 25 to 30% onto the budget, just paying for testing and everything. So yeah, it was, while I was really excited to get back into a studio and create with people, I was really excited to like not be in my apartment anymore. Yeah. But it was also like a really weird and freaky experience because a team would come together and work so closely and just run over to someone to ask a question or hang around with the audio people or chat with the camera department or something. And there was none of that. We were all in our own little pod. So I wasn't allowed to go into the control room. I wasn't eating in the same, like they had our bathrooms were for certain people and our eating areas, we ended up, it was the weirdest thing. Like it was me at a giant table alone eating my lunch with other people at giant tables alone eating their lunch just for the distance. Yeah. So those things are weird because at lunchtime we all get together and like work a little bit or, chat. And so it was just really strange. And then on top of it, I would say that mentally, it was hard. Like I felt like I was walking through the muck a lot. Like I didn't feel as sharp. I didn't feel like I was on top of everything all the time. Just because of the way the world is, there's a certain amount of, stress and worry and stuff that your energy is going into that. So maybe it's not fully going into the show.
And a lot of things that get sorted out working on a project like that kind of happen in a huddle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There was no huddling. I had a panel, an audio panel. I was on headset all the time. And if I wanted to talk to someone, it was through the panel. So it was a lot of headset chat.
Yeah. Now, and where did you guys shoot Family Feud Canada?
So we were at the CBC building on the 10th floor in that stadium.
Oh, okay. Right.
And I was specifically working with Jerry. So our pod was very small. It was me, Jerry, an audio person, and a wardrobe person. And the wardrobe person, Tara, was also like doing his hair and fixing
Right.
his makeup and stuff like that too. So it was a lot of like multitasking people for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And did you have to get tested every day when you came in?
No, so every day CBC would send me a thing that I had to check off, and it's just like, is your temperature above this? Have you traveled anywhere? Have you
Right.
been in contact? So basically I would just say, no, I haven't traveled, I'm safe. And I don't know if you heard about Battle of the Blades, but that show did get shut down because one of
Okay.
the crew members had COVID.
Right.
So my biggest fear was being the crew member that brought COVID to shut down
Sure.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I was being crazy safe, like not going out, not going into like bars or restaurants or patios or anything until I was done.
Well, I did a podcast, I did an interview with Mike Ross, who's the announcer for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's been the announcer since 2016. And he had a unique experience because, of course, they ended up playing all of the NHL playoff games in two arenas. One of them was Scotiabank Arena in Toronto. So he was doing the announcing there. So he announced not only Leaf games, obviously, but half of the playoff games.
Right.
And he said he announced, I think somewhere like in the mid 30s was the number of games that he did during the playoffs. And he had to be tested every single day when he came in with the swab and all that kind of stuff. And then they'd come in and they'd have, he was in like whatever it was like access 1, access 2, access 3. He could only go up to his booth where he announced. And they said then he had a washroom and it was on the other side of the building that he could use. And if he had to get there during the game, he goes, you just have to pretty much sprint all the way over. So it was more about managing how much water he drank during a game to avoid going to the washroom.
Yeah, like we had a hallway that only Jerry and I could walk down. Like it was pretty segregated for sure to keep us not traveling in the same areas. And food, like they had, brought in individual food for everybody. Like it wasn't a big buffet, obviously. And individually
wrapped stuff and
that was brought in. So it was like kind of crazy, but at the same time, like when we could forget all that stuff, we were still laughing our heads off and having a good time and meeting cool Canadian families and stuff. So
and being happy you could do that because there's so many people in our business that still haven't gotten a chance to get back to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just walking through the halls of CBC, they have that Comedy Hall of Fame area. Just walking down that hallway, it was not lost on me how lucky I was to be walking down that hallway because, as you said, a lot of our friends are still waiting to get back to work and back to some kind of new normal. So.
Yeah, and it's going to be a while that we're going to be working under these constraints for sure. I mean, this is
absolutely.
I don't think this is going to be going away. It's going to be a gradual thing. Until one day we're going to kind of realize this is kind of what it used to be like, I think.
Yeah.
But even I don't know if it's going to change completely. I think some of these constraints will still be in place to ward off potential future situations like these. But
I will be happy though. The thing by the end of the run of Family Feud, I was like, I never want to wear a mask for 13 hours a day again. Like it's just by the end of it, you're like, oh my God. And I also started asking people like, what do you think we'll do with our masks when we don't have to wear masks anymore? Like, I wonder if there'll be like giant sewing masks together to make art or something just to like reflect back on this time.
The Canadian a mask quilt.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Yeah.
So are there, is there anything out there that you kind of look at and you're like, I want to do this, I want to do that? What are some of the future projects you'd like to get involved in if you can?
Well, that is a solid question. I would love to do more stand-up specials. I have to like figure that out because JFL kind of has the monopoly on stand-up right now in Canada for both CBC
just
and
for laughs.
CTV. Yeah. So I adore it. It's fun to shoot. It's fun to edit. It's like you can be creative with a stage. And so I would love to do more of that kind of stuff. I'd also like to really work with people who have a different voice than mine. I think I've, for the most of my career, I've been working with the same type of people. So it'd be interesting to work with people that just, have different stories to tell, whatever that looks like. That excites me. I'm also a mentor through WIFT. So I've been mentoring women for the past 3 years.
That's Women in Film and Television is the name of that organization, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so a lot of really smart women who want to be writers. So I'm mentoring them through the system and getting them connected with the right people. And so that kind of stuff excites me. I've also talked to Algonquin College about creating a pipeline from Ottawa to Toronto to get
interesting.
More of the graduates down here if they want to. I don't know if you remember ever having any kind of Toronto link when you were in school, but I certainly do not. And I don't remember having any real opportunity in Ottawa either. Like I kind of made my own opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I know when I'm looking at resumes, if Algonquin pops up, I'm always kind of a little chuffed about it. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to work with the school and see if I can get some mentoring down this way, because as you know, all of our friends who graduated with us, like Caleb Watts runs Master Control in CBC, and Gary Tam is, one of the best TDs in sports and good writers, and Chris Crosby is a great editor. So there's so much talent that we can pay forward and help the new students coming out. And it's not going to get easier for sure in our business. It will only get harder. So if I can help that pipeline, I think it would be really, really fun.
Cool. Well, yeah, I'd love to hear more about that as you move forward with that, because that'd be something I'd be interested in getting involved with as well.
Oh, I'll get in touch with you, Dave McNeil, for sure.
Would you teach? I've been asked before if I would be interested in teaching, and it's something I might do somewhere down the line, but is that something that's ever crossed your mind, teaching broadcasting, or just doing it a part-time basis? Or I know quite a few of our friends have done it.
Yeah.
Richard's done it.
Yep. I would love to. I would actually love to. I think it would be super fun. It's funny with the mentorships that I've done, I end up learning so much from them as well, because they just have a new way of doing things. They're out there with their iPhone shooting stuff already. Yeah. It's cool. So as much as I give, I get, which is really lovely. So yeah, I would love a teaching position in a few years, maybe.
Yeah. Got lots of time.
Lots of time. There's so much to do. Yeah. Yeah. And then I would I'd like to do more show running. I'd like to get maybe another format show and produce it. I would love to do more directing too. I haven't directed in a really long time.
Yeah. You like directing?
I love directing. Yeah. It's really fun.
It's fun to figure out how to motivate people, right? And figure out what works for different people and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah. It's also just visually to tell a story and to work with a DP. And I'm really proud of still standing for that as well. I think it's a really good looking show. Jeff Cole is the DP on it, and we worked really closely together, and he's just so talented and so meticulous. And then we worked together to make the stand-up part of it really pop and really look great. And he's got sliders, and we had 5 cameras in the end. And so I like that part of it as well.
Yeah. Big thinkers.
Yeah. And it's always a MacGyver situation, right? Like, how do we make this work? So I like that challenge or problem solving as well. Like, how do we actually make this work?
Yeah. Well, that's what being a producer, I think of when I think of what is a producer, what is a producer's job? A producer is a problem solver. Yeah. They're the general of the army, or whether not necessarily they're one of the higher ranking people in the field, and their job is to make sure that all the problems are solved and things move forward. That doesn't come to a screeching halt and start costing a lot of money to produce this thing.
Yeah, and that it's not floating too far over so other people are finding out, or just keeping a lid on everything, making sure everyone knows everything's okay. We're going to get there. It's going to be fine.
Yes.
Some Jedi mind tricks along the way.
A little bit of glossing over on things that don't go so well. Or
if I say fine 3 times, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Maybe it's not fine, but it'll be fine.
It'll get there in the end.
Yeah. So super, super fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, we've got lots to look forward to. We still got a bunch of years in us if we want to continue working in this path, which I'm sure we both do.
Yep,
I don't know what else we would do.
What would I do?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be this fun, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been amazing. It's been nice to kind of go back over some of our common journey together and to talk about some of our common friends who've worked in the industry, and especially too to talk about what we both celebrated in the past year, and that was 25 years working in the industry in Toronto, and just all the good things that a city like Toronto can offer you if you want to work in the arts. At the end of the day, I'm just, I pinch myself and I look around and I know, people used to always say, oh, if you're going to work in the arts, it's going to be hard. You're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do that. Well, at the end of the day, my life has been pretty much a pretty great life. I've been able to do a lot of really fun and amazing things. And I've also been able to buy and sell houses and condos and live in nice places and have a nice standard of living. And I always had a car and a motorcycle and whatnot. And those are not things that you're not sure of when you get into the business if you're going to be able to live like the Joneses, whatever.
Yeah.
What I mean? You get into it and you're like, well, I hope I'm as successful at doing this as I hope I can be, but I don't know. And you don't know really what the future holds for you. But this is very much an industry that you can get into and have a great standard of living if you work hard and you hustle and you don't take off too many people along the way.
Yeah. And I think my letter to Toronto last year when I hit my 25 years here, I'm just so thankful to live in this city. It offers so much. We've had great experiences. We've seen the funniest comedy. We've seen the best live music. We've seen the best movies. We went to the Toronto International Film Festival. Yeah. We were just kicking around with each other, just having the best time. I live at Frenton Blue Jays Way. I look at the CN Tower every night. Sometimes it's a rainbow. And I just wonder, this is the best city in the world for sure. And I'm so thankful that I got to move here and take advantage of all the cool things it had to offer with some really, really amazing and cool people that I grew up with from Algonquin on.
I agree 100%. We both love Toronto a lot and the industry we live in, and we're lucky to say that. We're lucky to do that. So thank you, Maureen, for your time.
Thanks, Dave. This has been fun.
Appreciate it. It was lovely to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing you when I get back to TO. I'm really looking forward to getting back. While it has been really nice to be down here in Costa Rica for the past year, we didn't anticipate we were going to be here for a year. We thought we were going to be here for the winter, then come back and be able to, work in our respective fields again. I was hoping to get out and audition and work on some cool productions. That didn't happen. So this ended up being a good place to kind of hide away from the virus for a while, but I'm looking forward to getting back into town and working on some of those great projects that will inevitably come my way, come your way. Yep. So I'll be looking forward. We're hoping to be back there in May.
Great. So, we missed you. It's like a year's a long time.
It is a long time. Yeah. So I before that, I think the longest I'd been away from my home or from Canada had been kind of 3 weeks for an extended vacation or maybe a month. So it's been kind of cool, living abroad as well. But I am looking forward to getting home and working on some cool projects when I get back to TO. So hopefully there will be an opportunity to get together with some of our friends in a larger group by then, but we'll see. If not, we'll work our way around it until we can finally get out for that big party. Richard Garner said to me when this thing started, he goes, just imagine the party there's going to be at the end of this thing.
Imagine.
We look forward to that.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks for chatting with me, Maureen. Talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. There you have it, my conversation with the very lovely and talented Maureen Riley. Thanks to Maureen for sharing her cool story. Also, thanks again to Mr. Jerry Stamp, who wrote and performed the Cool Story theme song and all other jingles and stings that appear on the show. Do yourselves a favor and look for Jerry's music wherever you stream. And finally, thank you for listening. Until next time, pura vida.
Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. what's yours?